Scott, you and I jumped into Compulsion Games' latest title, South of Midnight, and dude, what a journey it's been. Before I get to my score, I want to hear from you. You and I have been talking off camera a lot throughout the last little while about where you're at, how you're feeling, where I'm at, how I'm feeling. We both completed the game. Scott, what are you scoring it?
Yeah, we certainly had a really fun water cooler moment the entire way through this game, because there's so many different moments to stop and absorb everything this game is throwing at you. And that began with the visuals. But before we get into that, like you said, I have to give this a 9 out of 10, but there are some holdups I do have, so we're going to get into that. But I would classify this shortly as a flawed beauty.
I think I'm right there almost with you. I'm a little below with 8.5. There's just been a couple little shortcomings. I think they could have used a little bit extra time and love and attention to really pull this off. I think South of Midnight is an incredible experience, but that's kind of where it holds me. There's so much that I love and adore of the game, how it feels, but then there's other parts I'm like, oh, not this again. We'll get to that here shortly, but I think you already know what I mean by when I talk about that one, Scott. Let's get into it, dude. You talked about the visuals. Before we get there, though, let's talk about the story. Basically, how it's all set up. Hazel is a weaver. She doesn't realize it yet, but she comes to know rather quickly that she's able to see these strands throughout the world, which then allow her to weave into time and change the understanding of her past and the world around her, as her mom has been swept away thanks to a hurricane downriver. That's the setup, the premise of the game. I thought it had a really strong starting of the game. Scott, what do you think about that? How did it start? Did it connect with you right off the hop?
It did connect with me right off the hop, but it did expose one of the blemishes right off the beginning too, because I'm thinking, okay, we're getting these great, well voice acted characters. We're learning her mother and her grandmother and Hazel herself, and that was all great. And it was setting the tone for, we're going to be spending the next, well, 15, 20, 30 hours. It gets quite longer than I expected, but we're going to be spending the time with these characters, and that was great. But once that water started rushing around and we're seeing the environments are beautiful, but the water was not. And that was the first thing that stuck out to me. I thought, oh no, it is rushing water, so it's perhaps one of the harder things to render. So I put it aside, sure. But I did notice that, and those issues started to grow from there. But when did you first get hooked on this one?
It was right from the very first trailer I saw, actually, that kind of had me, right? That art style, this claymation stop motion art direction that they took with South of Midnight was just incredible. Not alone the actual score of the game, which we'll get to that in a minute as well, but the art visual, dude, it was mesmerizing. I couldn't stop looking, just gazing around. I thought the textures, everything just kind of felt so unique. And honestly, it was just a breath of fresh air to play something like this with South of Midnight, taking such a unique direction, going into the deep south, giving us an accent of every character that feels believable, that we can just enjoy. Definitely came to some graphical hiccups here or there. You did mention the water, dude, later on too. There's another river scene, and the white rapids just like felt like they shot straight up in the air. I'm like, this seems kind of odd to me. It was a little off-putting, but the rest of the game though, dude, like the characters, the bosses you encounter, and how each of these little sections, each chapter they call it, wraps up, ends in a moment of holy crap. Almost every time for me, I was blown away. Boss fights, definitely the highlight of the game, and I hate boss fights, dude. I hate boss fights through and through. I'd rather just play the story, the campaign, and let me keep going. It was the boss fights though that really wrap up the end of that chapter, that make you feel this sense of completion and this sense of, holy, this is where they took the story. There are moments there that you talk about, those water cooler moments. You and I were like, yo, did you get to this? Yes. Okay, now what did you think of this when this happened? Because it was just no way. Compulsion really pushed, I think, the limits of storytelling within the game. What they didn't push though, Scott, was the combat, because the combat is dull, boring, and just, I was exhausted by the end of the game trying to get through another battle, because the way the battle system works is that you come into this area, it gets walled off, you're in an arena fighting the same enemies over and over and over, using your same abilities over and over. And by like, dude, I wanted to skip the combat. I did not care for the combat whatsoever. It took me out of the game. This is why I'm actually suffering my score down to an 8.5, because the combat is just boring as hell.
No, I think that is fair. I think the combat, just like every other aspect of the game, gets better towards the end, but it does get repetitive. It does get boring. I want to acknowledge that, but just like I looked at the graphics and I think, okay, your neighbor's dog looks really funny compared to this other aspect of the game that looks really good. Similarly, the combat's really weak, whereas the story, the music, the visuals is a really strong part of the game.
Music.
But when you get towards the end and you're getting some of these big, giant boss fights, that's where these things started really looking not believable, really fantastical, and really would capture my attention. So as much as I was kind of getting a little slow in the combat, when you meet Hugging Molly, for example, I'm right back up. I'm awake, I'm right back into it, and I'm just fired up, ready to go. I loved that, but I have to wrap all the way around to the audio, because the audio was just absolutely amazing. Most of the time throughout the game, you're getting kind of a background kind of song. It's very southern, it's very bluegrass kind of feeling. But then,
very cool. As
you approach the end of that chapter, it's almost like a recap of what you had, what you experienced, the story of the characters that you just met. And that's where the music swells, it gets vocals, it starts explaining things, and that's where you really learn the more of the backstory and how you really relate to some of these creatures. And it was so good. It reminded me of Bramble and how I see some of these fantastical elements, and I love it, and I need to see more.
I remember doing the preview and being blown away, because we were able to play chapter 3 in the preview, and I thought, man, can Compulsion carry this throughout the rest of the game? Because when Steve and I got to play that, we were like, this is wild. Already concerned with the combat then, the combat still carries through here and it's still just as boring. But the storytelling and the way the music, like you say, right, the music comes in and pulls it in, ties up the chapter. It tells you the story of the chapter through song, the entire thing, as you wrap up the end of that chapter. It is something I don't think I've ever actually heard or been seen done in the game before. Absolutely incredible. The music, the ambient sound effects, stellar. Like, the audio team alone, award winning. They'll be up for a game award of some sort for audio, because there isn't anything out there that matches this. This is fantastic. But again, it's the combat that really kind of suffers, that I think is really the downfall of South of Midnight. I think the voice acting is cool, the creatures, the environment, dude. Two-Tone Tom it's just like, there's just so many magical, fantastical world building elements to the game. It's such a standout for the year, but it's also hindered by some of the things here, and the graphical fidelity isn't quite always on point where it needs to be. So yeah, it's just a couple little minor things. But Scott, loved the game, an absolute gem. And it's one of those things, I think in 20 years when we come back, because of the art style direction that they took, the game will still hold the test of time.
Absolutely.